Good evening again. It's Nate Abbott from Abbott Business Networks in Gilmanton Ironworks, New Hampshire. I am repeating my Sunday netcast from last week. Last week I did a prolonged um, kind of a rant, an exhausted plea for secure computing, and I said a few things that I'd like to comment on quickly. One is that I think I implied by my statement that I'm going to be jacking up my prices because security threats are increasing. And that's not really what I meant to say. It's implied, I know, by what I said, but I think everybody that does business with me right now, I'm happy with the arrangement that we have, and I'm kind of the threat level that we have is in sight of what I'm charging them for the service that I provide, contract service that I provide. I think that may change. I am switching tools. I am adopting an endpoint protection product by a company named Cylance, and I'm recommending that. And it is more expensive than what I've been using previously. But I feel it's that sophisticated and improved that it's worth essentially the insurance against infection by malware and ransomware. I also spoke at length and not in a very well prepared way. So I'm going to try and make these a little shorter and try and do a better job at keeping my energy up and focusing on facts that are useful. So the theme last week was the WannaCry malware attack. I called it WannaCrypt. I think it goes by both names. It did have a very widespread impact. It turns out that most of the impact were systems that were running Windows XP, Windows Server 2003, and Windows Vista, which are out-of-date versions of Windows and which do not receive regular updates for security. For better or for worse, Microsoft from time to time stops supporting an operating system. They do it after releasing at least 2 new ones. So since Windows Vista, Microsoft has released Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. And yes, all of those count, even though almost no one uses Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. They count. And indeed, many servers run the Windows 8 interface, which is an interesting, the Windows 8.1 interface, and that's just something we adapt to. But so if you don't run Windows XP still, and you don't run Windows Vista, and you don't run Windows Server 2003, and you maintain your updates and they're right up to date, and you have decent malware protection, a reliable product that has a good reputation, you're probably okay. And that's the good news. And we wanted to make extra sure that everybody we protect was safe because it's very costly when a problem happens. So some interesting things have happened since last week. I think I mentioned that a security researcher in England, he is in England, he had discovered the threat and found, actually he was analyzing traffic, and he found a domain that the malware checks, and if it finds the domain, that is, it's able to connect to a host at the domain name, it shuts itself down, because the assumption is if the domain exists, the software is under scrutiny in some kind of a sandbox or lab. That's an explanation that Wired Magazine gave. I'm not sure I completely buy that explanation, to be honest with you, because it doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's just a way of doing remote control so that they can turn the thing on and off as they see fit. And it was written that way, but it wasn't deployed by people who were as sophisticated as the authors. That's the likely scenario in my mind. And it may be that some of this was government code, where the obfuscation was there um, so that it could creep in and dwell undetected for a period of time. Oh, that's kind of spicy, isn't it? Anyway, uh, that may have been why that was, but we've all presumably been spared um, attempts from this malware because this security researcher registered the domain and made a site that exists so that wherever the software infects, it finds this domain alive and does not proceed to encrypt the files. It goes dormant. Good news and bad news. Bad news is those people don't know they have it. Good news is they haven't lost their files. If they can find it and remove it before it reactivates, good for them. But we know that many of them won't. I mean, that's just a fact. So, and so do a lot of people around the world, and a lot of people who don't have our best interests in mind. And so, Wired does a good job of basically summing up that there have been two big attacks across the internet in the last year. One was called Mirai, and that was originated by cheap electronic devices that have internet services associated with them. Typically, these are baby monitors, network routers, security cameras, and the worst offenders are the very cheap ones that come really just with the function enabled, and the manufacturer is under enormous price pressure, and so they do the minimum to deploy this service in this device. And this could be a camera you buy at Walmart. I don't know for a fact whether they sell it at Walmart. Walmart should know. I think it would be good. At any rate, there is an infection called the Mirai infection, and because these devices are so poorly engineered, they sell them to you. You take them out of the box, and the software that runs them is completely in its default state, meaning there is no password protection on it. And if you connect it to the internet, anyone can log into it and control your device. And there's stories of, people being in their children's bedrooms and have some stranger talk to them through the speaker on the device. And so just a great amount of internet activity right now are malware publishers scanning for the devices on the internet that might carry this very cheap, it's actually an edition of Linux operating system, which is not commonly used in the desktop. You who use desktop computing know Windows and Macintosh, but you've probably heard of Linux. But Linux is a very widely used operating system for more machine applications and large server applications, and it descended from an operating system called Unix, and it's a beautiful thing. But when it's implemented badly, it's just as insecure as any Windows system. And on these little camera devices, it's extremely insecure and it's extremely dangerous because these are sold in far greater quantities than desktop computers. They're in comparable quantities to cell phones. So you get tens of millions of these devices that go out into the world, and there's no incentive for you if you bought one to check it or understand, because it works most of the time, even if it's been affected by the Mirai botnet. But once the Mirai botnet gets control of it, it keeps doing the job it does for you, the person who bought it. But it also does a job for the Mirai botnet. And what the Mirai botnet does, and there's many of them, they're basically rings of criminal hackers who take control of large numbers of these cheap devices and use them like little pew 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 spaceships. They just shoot packets wherever they tell them to over the internet. And a packet is a basic unit of information. That's what all of these computers on the internet use to communicate. But if you get 10, say, let's say you get 2 million of these devices, and you just say, send every bit of spare time that you've got. Send a packet, 20 times a second at this web address, and you get 1 million of those devices, or 2 million, or 5 million, or 10 million, all sending packets at the same time to the same address. Whoever they're targeting is going to be overwhelmed with traffic. It's called a distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS attack. You've heard of this in the news, maybe. Well, I know this is taking a long time. I'm gonna wrap it up. Several of these botnet operators are DDoSing the kill switch domain, the domain that the security researcher registered which shut down WannaCry or WannaCrypt. And they're doing it just to see what will happen if it wakes up. And this gets back to this weird culture out there, in that originally, when I started working in computers 30 years ago, and the first hackers started creating malware, it was all about impressing a friend. It was really about showing, being able to extend power, right? I think we understand that. If we can demonstrate we have power, that impresses people. And we're social animals, so there's a lot of value in impressing another human being. And I think that's what the original hacker ethos is look what I can do. I can take these banks and insurance companies offline, and they have to scramble and get themselves back on those silly empty suits, rolling their money, whatever. And so that changed. And it really, really changed about 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, it was changing already. And the change was that this wasn't to impress a girl or a guy or your friend anymore. This became, malware and viruses became a way to make money. And once that got discovered, in my view, there's this long trail of development. First, it was the hackers who did it for the quote-unquote lulz, laugh out louds, the joy of doing something and impressing a friend. But that went on long enough that someone, with a criminal intent said, I'm not going to waste my mind to impress somebody. I want some money. And they started to make money with some schemes. And if you ever see the window pop up on your computer that says, dial this number now, you've been infected. This is Microsoft. Call us at this 800 number. We'll get on your computer and we'll fix it. Have your credit card ready. Well, let me tell you, in case you didn't know, Microsoft never does that. And that scheme's been going on for a long time. But where it really pivoted was with ransomware. Ransomware was the perfect scheme. And I listened to a security researcher named Steve Gibson. He's actually a journalist and software developer, and he's a very smart guy. And he's on a podcast called Security Now. And I think in 2012 was the first crypto locker attack, and that was the first ransomware attack. And he said, get ready, because the game has changed. And WannaCry is just the latest. And WannaCry is not as sophisticated as it could be. WannaCry had these opportunities kind of to be slowed down. But now the community is the people who make money, and the people who want to prove they have a little power. And so there are people who are operating botnets who say, WannaCry needs another chance. Let's take this website down. So they're attacking the kill switch website. And thankfully, the researcher has some resources to adapt, and that's a long story. I won't get into how you adapt to a DDoS attack or defend yourself against a DDoS attack. But here we have one major realm of infection of attack, Mirai, now interacting with the latest wave, WannaCry, and trying to enable it, trying to relaunch it. So you've got to keep your awareness up, and I'm hoping that there's kind of a downward slope in this wave. These things do come in waves. and everybody kind of figures out what to do to defend themselves. That's good news. But W.C. Field says there's a sucker born every minute, and don't be that person. Pay attention, keep your system secure, and we're looking forward to a time when we really don't have to worry about this. And I really do think it's coming. This is just getting very old, tiring. And anyway, thanks for your time tonight. And we'll do something new next week. Hopefully, we won't maybe talk about security because it's getting kind of old. But it is the thing in the news, and it's the thing everybody's been worried about. It's still something to pay attention to. Okay, thanks. Good night.